Barbell deadlifts, barbell squats, overhead press, lat pull down, chest press. And when you're ready to stop, repeat. That's how we climb Olympia. When you push that extra rep, when you pull another set, when you lift that one last rep, you will climb the mountain and no one will forget. Bring on the build with the NASM Physique and Bodybuilding Coach Program.
You're listening to Random Fit with hosts Wendy Batts and Ken Miller, winner of a Gold Markham Award for Digital Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Random Fit. I am Wendy Batts here with my friend and co-host, Mr. Ken Miller. Ken, how are you today?
I am awesome, Wendy. How you doing? You're looking good.
Oh, thanks. I'm glad to be here. Very excited about today's podcast for sure, because we have a very special guest. And if you're okay with it, Ken, I'm just going to go ahead and do a quick intro and we're going to bring him on.
Bring him in.
All right. So today we actually have a special guest. His name is Andrew Menter. He is originally from South Africa, and he actually moved to Dallas when he was young. He actually got his MBA, and he's a licensed but non-practicing attorney, which I find very fascinating. And then he, after doing investment banking, said, I'm not going to do it. He started his own company called Viviture. And then this company worked with college health centers and athletic departments. Once he sold that, he got involved with becoming the only non-founder CEO of Trigger Point. And then in 2016, he then founded the Sports Medicine Clinic and began his adventure with Physmodo, which is what we're going to talk a lot about today. Let's bring him on.
Hello, Wendy and Ken.
Hi, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.
All right. Well, I'm excited to get to know you a little bit better through Random Fit podcast here. So, you know what? Wendy says you went from law, you did a startup, you sold that, got involved with Trigger Point, and now you have your company now called Physmodo. But before we start talking about Physmodo, I'm just curious more about you and how you meandered through your career from law into fitness. I mean, starting up your own business and then, startup and selling. But to get involved with the actual field of fitness and movement, as we're about to discuss, what's attracted you to doing what you're doing now, coming all the way from your background in law? Because that's not easy to do and get into, but that's a big transition. So I'm really curious about you and your journey to where you are today.
Well, let's be clear. I never practiced law, so my background in law is only 3 years in law school, and I remember my first class was constitutional law, and about 30 minutes into the class, I'm like, this is not for me. But I have 30 minutes shy of 3 years left in this, so but I ended up completing it and did the MBA with it, because I figured early on law is probably not a good thing for me. But I took the bar and passed that, mainly because it made my mom happy, and got into investment banking. And one thing I learned about myself, particularly when with Viviture, is I loved running my own company, but I didn't have a passion for what I was doing. And so having torn my calf when I was 13 or 14 playing tennis, I've always had movement problems and really, not been able to address them. So once I got a little bit more familiar with movement, and I'd had a screen that was a great screen, but a manual screen, and I never got to do it again, then came across this technology that allowed us to do what we're doing today, and said, you know what, I get to run my own company and do something that I love. So that's how we're here today.
I love it. Well, Andrew, before we start diving deeper, and we talked about, just briefly Physmodo, but what is it? So what if, we're going to talk about it, but can you give us a little kind of history of what Physmodo is?
Sure. So after I was 13 or 14, the injuries didn't stop. And, through playing tennis and rugby and triathlon, none of which really meshed together, I was injured a lot, and it was all on my left side. I ruptured my Achilles tendon on the left side. I got a slap tear on my left side. I ruptured my bicep tendon on the left side. So something was, something was obviously going on there. And then I've had that manual screen, which I thought was great, but it was not repeated. It was when I, signed up for a gym. Um, and then when I learned about what Microsoft was doing and using the Kinect and this depth camera, which, if everyone knows the Xbox, it's pretty cool and looks at your body and can see your joints. And I thought, you know what, this could probably be used for a movement technology that makes it a little better or faster than the manual one, and help address some of the issues that I personally have had and seen others, particularly through the sports medicine clinic that I started whenever that was. So yeah, so that's how Physmodo got started. And then what we were trying to do was look at the movement screens that were out there and see, there's a lot of great ones, but see what maybe could be a little better. And what was important to us was making sure that it's a quick screen and you can get a lot of throughput. The first year that we were at URSA, we got 1,000 people screened in 2 days. So we were getting that throughput, we were getting that automation, and yeah, it's just through one movement, the overhead squat, which I can thank a lot. I can thank Chris Frankel, who people may know, one of the best, whatever he calls himself these days, sports scientist, data guy, all that. He does a lot, but he was instrumental in helping us get to where we are.
So that's a lot. That's a lot of information to gather over one day. 1,000 entries into the program. So how does it actually work? How do you process so many people so quickly to where you can affect so many lives?
Yeah, I think that that's by virtue of us doing the one movement, the overhead squat, or really just a functional squat. So what people will do is you really don't need anyone there with you, because the software guides you where to stand and walks you through the movement. And the movement is just 3 overhead squats, and the camera is reading everyone's joints, so it can see your shoulders, your elbows, your knees, your ankles, etc. And through that, we can measure, your mobility, just whether it's shoulders, ankles, knees. We can measure your stability. So, for instance, are you activating your scaps, your forward torso lean, and then also your posture. And what's important to me is symmetry, because as you probably know, or as you definitely know, the number 2 cause of injury is asymmetry behind previous injury. So yeah, that's what we do. So then we one goes through the screen, we get a score, a composite score based on those 4 domains, individual scores for each of those, and then it'll say, hey, here's an indicator. For instance, here's an indicator on your right shoulder. You do not have good shoulder mobility, and it's a means for a trainer or that person to say, okay, now I know I have a poor shoulder. Let me do something about it.
I love it. Well, and Ken and I, in multiple podcasts, always talk about, and I know Marty Miller and I do on the Master Instructor Roundtable podcast that we have, we talk a ton about, just proper movement and assessment. So in your point of view, obviously tying everything back, how do you guys take that information and do you tie it back into programming, or you just get these results and then what happens?
Yeah, the kind of so what now what after you've gotten the screen. So what we do is, again, I'm just using the shoulder as an example. Let's say I go through a screen and there's a couple things. My shoulder, there's a problem there, and there's a problem. I can't get squat depth. I mean, I'm only getting to 70 or so degrees. And so we have the programming on the back end that looks at, some of my, pardon me, some of my movement issues, And then there's a program with some of the corrective protocols that can then help improve that shoulder and ankle. And what I really like, and this was part of the purpose of us doing it the way we're doing it, is that you can have a screen, do a little movement prep, and then re-screen, 5 or 10 minutes later. And what that'll all do is hopefully get one in a better position to work out. And then based on future movements and really what your baseline score is, you can just adjust your workout, or frankly, just adjust how you enjoy your day based on how you're moving.
Awesome.
Very nice. And information like that as a fitness professional, and with what both Wendy and I do, that, as Wendy said, that's something that, we encourage all trainers to do at some point in time. And you're mentioning, doing, let's say, a pre and a post within even minutes of each other to gain, to better understand if your protocols were indeed effective. If I'm hearing you right, that's what you're talking about. Assess, implement a strategy, and then reassess just to see if it's actually working.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll give you an example. We worked at the University of Tennessee.
Sorry.
Yes. Yes.
Go Big Orange, by the way.
Is it a bad time to say I'm sorry about a couple weeks ago? Though you still have a shot. You still have a shot.
Thanks, Andrew.
Tough, really tough conference. Yeah, you should be in the TCU conference. You guys would be undefeated. What was the question?
About evaluation and reevaluation after implementing some kind of movement strategy.
We were talking about the volunteers.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the reason that Tennessee reached out to us was they were doing something where they could, because of the time it took to assess their athletes, and there's almost 600, they were really only measuring the movement once a semester, and it was impossible to track the athletes when they're home for the summer or on the road. And so we went in there, and now their athletes can go into their sports tech room, and they don't even need a coach there, and they'll do their assessment once a week. And what's nice, I think, especially for the coaches, is that they can say, okay, Ken, you're an athlete there, and your average score is a 64. We don't do grade school scoring. We do this modified Z scoring. So 50 is average. So your 64 is great. And let's say you rock in one day and you get a 47. So your coach at that point gets a notification that says, hey, something's wrong with Ken today. I don't know exactly what it is, but something's up.
I've heard that before.
Something's jacked up with Ken's movement today. So, yeah. And so your coach will say, okay, we had some programming for you today. We're going to change that. Today's not going to be heavy deadlift day because something's, something's off with your ankles. Something's off with your quads today. And so that's what I like about having this baseline score. You can kind of compare if you're moving well, or you're not. So, that's I think a big benefit of the screen, besides the program that can help you get better.
Now you mentioned a couple of points there, and my background is that I worked with the University of California in Berkeley as a strength and conditioning coach, and I worked with football, gymnastics, golf, and softball. And to your point, to feed off of that environment for a second, when I would reassess, there'd be a time on the calendar. When I say calendar, it would be like in the beginning of fall, right before we let them go for winter break, and then the beginning of spring, and then, as you mentioned, right before we send them home for the summer. And from there, they would get was it a shoulder protocol? Was it a hip protocol? Was it a foot and ankle protocol to help work on things? So intermittently, as often as I would love to assess the athletes, because let's say I had 24 girls with the softball team, at that point in time, I was manually, right, go ahead and do your squat. Let me watch you from the front, the side, and the back. Let me go ahead and watch you do a single leg squat. And then I'd have to do that, the individualized programming for each one of my athletes. Then it's time behind the computer, time programming, and trying to create a corrective exercise protocol, if you will, for each one of the athletes. And that would take time on top of the strength conditioning program. And to feed into that point, I mean, it was very laborious when it came to writing the programs based on the assessment, so I can only do it so often. But the other part of it is, as a strength coach, not all strength coaches have the same background or understanding or the need for some kind of corrective strategy that can be used before the actual strength conditioning programming. So there's also that skill deficit that typically, not always, is a limitation in the field of performance. So the fact that you're able, someone can come in, the coach gets a notification and says, hey, here's what's up. Maybe we should do something about it before we have them put him on the practice field, before we put, 315 pounds on his back, right? And get these things addressed before we put real stress onto the body. So that's a great application for that.
Yeah. Here's the way I look at it, because I can wake up every morning and I know my HRV. I can know my resting heart rate. I can know my overall recovery score. And if we did that, as you said, like, once a semester, once in the summer, that tells us absolutely nothing, because we don't know what our baseline is. And so, I mean, HRV, I mean, at least for me, it varies significantly. And so at the university in Tennessee and elsewhere, they have so much sports technology, one of which is, Whoop or whoever it may be, and can adjust workouts based on how well that athlete is recovered. But I mean, movement, I'm going to steal from Chris Frankel once again, movement is this forgotten component of health. And it's really a vital sign. And so the problem is, I can't wake up in the morning and tell how I'm moving based on something that's on my wrist or my finger. And I get that, but to look at someone's recovery and not look at the biomechanics and only look at the biometrics, I think that doesn't tell the full picture. I've gotten a decent HRV score, and yet I've done some deadlifts and my legs are a little jacked up. Now that should affect my HRV in some way because I've stressed my body, but I'm not in a position, despite my HRV being 70 or 80, to do a lot of lower body work today. So we're just trying to complement what's relatively easy now with biomechanics and have something equivalent, or with biometrics, something equivalent with biomechanics.
I love it. And those of you guys that are joining us today on Random Fit, myself, Wendy Batts, and Ken Miller are here with Andrew Menter, the CEO and founder of Physmodo. And Andrew, I think you bring up a very, very important point right there. And especially with what we do for a living, we want people to move better, because if you move better, you feel better, you perform better, and just overall, you're less stress on your joints. So your energy level should also increase. So, when you're thinking about all of these different screens that are out there, and I know, like with NASM, we primarily use the overhead squat to really kind of see how someone's moving. We, of course, do that more manually, but application wise, with so many different screens out there, what, in your opinion, differentiates Physmodo from the others?
Well, you're going to be tired of hearing about this, but one of the things we like is the fact that it is, 30 seconds and very repeatable. And in doing just the overhead squat, we don't pretend that we get everything, but it is the one movement that's in every single screen, because it does give us so much information. Now, I don't want to say we're we're better than the other screens necessarily. We're just very different. And I think we can really work in conjunction with some of these other screens. And here's how. So we're not a diagnostic tool. We're just giving information which says, hey, you're not moving that well today. I don't know exactly why your ankle's messed up or why your shoulder's messed up, but let's pay let's pay attention to what's going on there. But stealing from what we talked about with Ken, if Ken's usually a 64 and comes in with a 47, this may be a good opportunity to do one of those other screens that takes a little longer. Because if you're coming in with your 64 around there every day, do we need to do additional assessments on you? Probably not. We know that you are where you normally are. But if someone's way off, let's spend a little more time and work with some of these other screens that have some other movements and really dig a little deeper. So I think we're complementary to a lot of the other screens.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
Now with application, we're usually talking to the health and fitness enthusiast. We talked about strength conditioning. What other environments is applicable for the use of Physmodo and this evaluation of the overhead squat?
Yeah, I think there's really two ways that at least I look at what we do. First and foremost, it is a measurement tool, but it's also really an engagement tool. So it's in the health and fitness space, and I promise, Ken, I'll answer your question. In the gym space, in the trainer space, it's a measurement tool that really helps you engage with your clients and help them as much as possible. But in some of these other environments, such as college sports or working with the military is not trying to engage the soldiers, and Dan Worth at Tennessee is not trying to necessarily engage with the athletes. They're already engaged and they kind of have to do what Dan says. But in those situations, it's just to try and prevent injuries. So we look at the places where there are a lot of injuries and how it affects one. So in the Army, there's 12% of soldiers that are not deployable for non-combat related issues. The vast majority is musculoskeletal. That costs, I'd say millions and millions, but it's billions and billions. Someone comes in at age 18 and busts up the knee. Well, that's a lifelong injury that the government's paying for. Not to mention that person, can't do his or her job. Other markets, look at the number 2 expense for employers behind labor is healthcare costs. And there are all these, and kind of coming back to biometrics, we look at circulatory issues, regulatory issues, metabolic issues, but the number 1 claim is healthcare. It's actually 54% of Americans are reporting a musculoskeletal injury every year, where it's like a 30% circulatory and 20-something% respiratory. So again, movement is this complete forgotten component of health. And in the employer space, we can help identify issues ahead of time, so we don't have some of the employees going to surgery. So I can look at someone's hip mobility or core strength and say, hey, you may not be injured today, but I'm pretty sure you're going to get a back issue. So let's jump in now. And it really becomes a preventative tool.
I love it. Well, Andrew, with everything, that you guys are doing, technology has changed and it's constantly changing, especially within the last few years. So how is that translated into the evolution of the screen that you guys have today, and then the software that supports it?
Yeah. So awesome question. Yeah, it took you like 15. You finally asked a good one, Wendy.
I know. I'm working on it.
Yeah, you're getting better. I'll maybe finally give you a good answer. So, again, before Microsoft came along with this Kinect camera, which was mainly used for video games and gestures, it was pretty much all manual. But when Microsoft released this, the Kinect to software developers, it was great. But the problem, if you recall the Kinect, and again, it's in the Xbox, it's kind of a bulky thing. And so when we started out, we had this big kiosk and a big Dell monitor and the separate depth camera, which did, had a great output, but it was really kind of bulky and cumbersome and pretty tough to scale. Subsequent to that, the technology in iPads and iPhones got so much better. And so we can now do the same screen in one device. So no kiosk, no separate depth camera. And, again, just using it on your iPad. You can set up your iPhone or iPad in your home, set it up against this, and I'm holding up a coffee cup, and assess at home. And certainly with a kiosk Dell monitor and separate depth camera, that was not possible. I mean, we did encounter initially some limitations because the camera is not as powerful as the Kinect camera, and subsequent to that some others. But it certainly takes away some of the issues we had, which is form factor, and it's just a much more scalable screen right now that can get to the masses.
So with that, I mean, you're talking about your hardware, the technology needed. So it's as easy as having a tablet or a laptop to assess movement. Is that all the hardware somebody would need? So outside of downloading whatever application or visiting a website, the end consumer can just use what's available, or is there a separate bit of technology that's supporting it? So when you're talking about the camera, I'm just trying to get a better idea of what it is that you actually need to execute the assessment process.
Yeah, I mean, there's a color camera in your phone or on your iPad. So you could download the app right now, set it up in your home, do a screen, maybe do a couple exercises and re-screen in the time it probably gets in the time for me to answer one question. And I am long-winded, so that's part of it. But even still, in several minutes, you could do all that in your living room.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it, and it absolutely is phenomenal. That's why we wanted to bring him on. You're, obviously being the information is great, but can you talk a little bit, because I know Physmodo uses a 2D camera, and I know there are 3D cameras out there. So, with the differentiation of you guys still using 2D, is the information still reliable? I know you're going to say kind of yes, but can you kind of go into more detail of why you guys went that route?
For sure. Well, I thought we had to go with something like the iPad because, of the scalability and ease of use and being able to, reach the masses. But yeah, we were concerned because we're not getting, all three planes. And so our scoring is 1 to 100. And we were nervous that, because it doesn't have the power of the depth camera, that someone could come in and get a 55 and then rescreen right away without doing any correctives and get a 65. And that wouldn't look very good. So we said, well, let's just do a 1 to 10 because, 5 to 6 is not bad. Now, that's not great either because it's going to be really, really difficult to improve a score, frankly, get worse. So that was a big concern, but we were, I don't want to say fortunate. I mean, we have a great team, and we had all this experience with 3D. So we were able to take the 2D, the color camera, and we got algorithms and used inverse kinematics to which, we've gotten a patent on, several patents actually on that, to where we can infer some of the things that we're getting from 3D. So that was step one. And step two is actually testing it. And the reliability shocked me. It is spot on. You're never going to be, exactly the same. But if you do, and people ask, well, if I do two assessments, will I get the same score? And the answer is, yeah, if you do the squats in the same way. But yeah, it's within 1 or 2 points, which it was on the dev camera. So, kudos to our dev team. And, we're able to do a 1 to 100 system. And whether you've done the movement on the depth camera before or using it now, if you're doing the same set of squats, you're going to get the same score within 1 or 2 points.
That's awesome.
Oh, that's great. So just to put myself in, we're talking about application now, because I'm all about, okay, information's great only to the level that you're able to use it. So as a personal trainer in the health club or the gym environment, can I use this technology for my clientele as far as assessing my client results? So I'm just looking at now user availability from a personal trainer standpoint.
Yeah. So I'm sure you do an awesome job, Ken, and your clients. I don't know how you do it. Maybe the first 5 or 10 minutes is some movement prep, and after those 10 minutes, you could because again it's 30 seconds, you could objectively show your client that he or she, that based on what you've done, he or she has improved movement in those 10 minutes. Now, what we're very conscientious of is we're not telling you, Ken, how to do your job. And if your clients have whatever issues, pardon me, I'll stick with shoulder because why not? I've abused that for this entire podcast. But yeah, we have some programming that we can offer you, but you may have a different approach. We're not pushing our approach on you. We'll give you a library of a lot of corrective videos that you can do whatever you want with. But again, we're just providing you information. You're the artist, Ken. You can then take the information that we're providing and letting you and helping dictate your session. So I think it's an invaluable tool. If you were at a point where you had to do a 20-minute screen, I mean, I don't think your client would be very appreciative of taking up almost half the session by doing a screen. Right. So we'd like for you to be able to do both.
Yeah. And I think that the information that you can get is great. Plus, Andrew, I know for myself, utilizing an app such as Physmodo allows me to say, hey, every day, especially as much as I've been traveling, I want you to do, your screen. And I want to know, how are you feeling today? How is your body moving? And that information with the exercises on the corrective side, I think is something that a lot of my clients can do at home. And so I'm very appreciative for technology that allows my clients to still be accountable when I'm not there holding their hand or putting them through a session or telling them exactly what they can do. Plus, I think the videos that are provided within this type of app have been extremely useful because not a lot of people on the consumer side really understand how to do those movements correctly. So I think you guys have done an incredible job of putting this together. I think the technology, like I said, I've seen it. I think the information that's provided, especially because I'm very specific and I wanted to know if it worked. And it does, just so you guys know. But one final question that I have for you, because I can ask you a bunch of questions all day, but what's next for Physmodo? Like, where are you guys headed?
Well, you mentioned the airport. We've talked about, wouldn't it be interesting if you could just measure yourself pre-flight, sit on a plane for 10 hours and see where you are after that? And anyway, we should be in every airport. That would be super interesting. But where do we go next? The question I get, quite a bit is, all right, you guys are nailing it with the overhead squat. What's next with movements? And the answer is nothing. We're not doing. We do have a roadmap, but it's not having a second movement. because while that would give more information, I think that 30 seconds and the automation would be very difficult. And I think we're getting 75, 80% of what we want with this one movement. So what's next is we're going to take our movement scores and indicators and do, a lot more with that. So we're going to make this more fun. So as an example, what does, getting back to Ken's, what did I give you, 64? How do you compare in, your age group, men 25 to 29, right, Ken? So how do you compare? Let's go back to University of Tennessee, and they look at this is, how are you comparing within your sport? How are you compared to other sports? How are you comparing as in baseball? How are you comparing to your outfielders or pitchers? The point being, we're going to make this super fun and more engaging. And I think that's, one of the primary components. And then just on, again, right now with the corrective protocols on how to improve your movement, I think there's another big opportunity, and I won't go into too much of this because it's not released, which it wouldn't be since you're asking for roadmap. But I think that, sometimes there's pre-programmed workouts, and, to your point, Wendy, you can't be with your client all the time. But if you've programmed a certain workout and your client can come in, and based on movement, we can then take that and you can provide, some scaling option. If that can be automated, I think that's really, really valuable. So I think in summary, we're not going to do all these other movements, but we're just going to have more utilization for the information, that we're collecting today. And then what we've learned is that we just don't know everything. And we're just getting, great feedback from people like you and Ken and those in, some of the other markets. And I'm like, hey, you know what? I didn't really think about that, but that's a great opportunity for us to add to what we're doing now. So, there's a couple things that we think about, but we're not the subject matter experts. So we're talking to you and we're and others and getting the feedback, and we'll look at whether there's a business case for that, and if there is, we can always build it.
That's great. I mean, technology sounds great, and the fact that you guys are looking to expand the spaces that you can apply this information, and I think utilization is in multiple environments is going to be awesome. I can't wait to see you guys grow within not just the fitness industry, but also, when you think about military, those who serve our country, athletics, keeping athletes healthy so that they can be more durable throughout the season. That's some great stuff. So I just want to say, Andrew, hey, this was some great information as far as what technology is available to help people move and feel better. So thank you, and we really appreciate your time here on Random Fit.
Well, I really appreciate being on and talking to you, Wendy and Ken, and we'll keep you posted on where we're going on that roadmap and make it better and better.
That's right. We'll keep our eyes on you, Andrew. So Thank you, everybody, for joining us here on Random Fit with both Wendy Batts and I, Ken Miller. We just had guest Andrew Menter and talking about Physmodo. So great information. But if you like what you heard here on this episode, awesome. Please like, follow, subscribe, comment. But more importantly, let us know if there's other things that you want to know and hear about when it comes to Random Fit. So until next time, everybody, take care and be well.